I think also like to go with the subjects that you were talking about in your last video, because you know how like your last video is talking about like this counterculture of the '60s
Right.
and sort of a call to return to that method of thinking, right?
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that like even in the '60s, like Zen Buddhism and stuff was when it hit the Western world. I really do feel like, just intuitively speaking, like this concept of we like just the simple fact that enlightenment means that like everyone is one is like so useful at a time when everyone is so divided. Because
Absolutely.
how could you hate if you're a Democrat? How could you hate a Republican if they are you? You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Right.
I want to see like
It's a powerful idea.
a return of this in Western culture.
Same. That's exactly why I concluded on that in the video, is because I view that as the path forward, at least for now. You know, maybe not forever. I think it's all a part of a cycle, but I think
Yeah, I agree.
we're missing that. We're missing that sense of oneness for sure.
Yeah, we've become too separated and material.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know. It's like also the fact that there's so many more people who are reaching the state now thanks to the internet just makes me think like the utility of like these people could be like helping the world, and they probably want to as well, based on what I've seen.
Yeah. I wish I wish if I added one more section to this video, it would have been a talk connecting the idea of consumerism and products with what is materialism, with what is thinking that objects in a 3D space, that surfaces you touch and feel physically, are more meaningful than emotions or consciousness, really,
Mm-hmm.
and art on some level. And I think we've lost sight of that. We've lost sight of, I think, people in general, just across most modern civilization, modern parts of the world. Not every part of the world. Like I'm sure India is more. Actually, I heard something once saying like Indians, they always. It's much more common for them to use hashish, and they use it regularly, like every day or something like that. Like they'll use it very frequently as just a normal part of their day, and it's something similar to the effects of cannabis, as far as I understand. Maybe it's I don't
Basically
know.
the same thing. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean
it's
like
pretty
they're made of the same stuff.
right. And there's also cultures from all around the world that have engaged in similar. Because I would consider cannabis a mild psychedelic, is how I would classify it. That's its
Agreed,
effects.
especially after last night.
Yeah. And but like I said, there are places all over the world where ayahuasca is popular in the Amazon amongst
Yeah,
certain tribes. They have
Peru and
traditions
stuff.
there. Peyote in the Native American traditions. But you could find examples all around the world. But the American example was very much LSD and shrooms. LSD was synthesized, of course, in the lab, but shrooms are like our natural growing, and for Canadians too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's like our natural growing psychedelic that grows in this part of the world, and it has a somewhat different effect than ayahuasca or like these other ones, but I think it's no less beneficial and possibly enlightening if used in a healthy, like the right setting. Because I think if you go in with the wrong mentality and you like fight your experiences and you're in a place of fear or something, that's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, no matter what drugs you do. I mean, okay, maybe there's a dose of some drugs that are like so powerful that you can't fight it. But ultimately, you do a drug, if you fight it, you're not gonna like have
Yeah.
epiphanies or whatever
Yeah, you have
necessarily.
to be in a state of somewhat peace, I think, with yourself a little bit to begin with, in order
Yeah,
for it to be a state of acceptance. You have to be wanting to accept, willing and wanting to accept. If you're not, then you're going in with a fight mentality, because you're either going to accept it or you're not. And if you accept, if you're in, and by it I mean just whatever realizations happen, not the substance itself. I think that's where people get it wrong. I just view the substance as because I got some criticisms in my comments, and like people like, oh, you're pushing drugs or whatever. like a couple people said that, which I never, by the way, advocated for taking anything. I just said perhaps hope for the future lies in these substances, which there's clinical trials showing help with depression. I mean, that's really all I said in terms of prescription. But beyond that, I think that itself is a materialistic view of what they are. Because the materialist views substances as a physical object, as this is a mushroom, this is a substance that's producing X effect. But what they don't view, or this is a substance, and that's just what that's its chemical makeup, rather, divorced from the effect, let's say. And like they'll view sitting down and watching TV as fundamentally different than taking a substance, even though the mind-altering effects might be comparable in the sense that when you're watching TV, what is happening? Your attention is fixated on something. It's fixated on a presentation. Your audio receptors are focused on the audio from the video. Your eyes are focused on that. And so in that sense, it's a combination of sensations. And that's what psychedelics are. Only it, I would say, alerts you to sensations that you're normally not as focused on or receptive to. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, there's a degree in severity between something like TV and psychedelics, but I agree with what you're saying at its fundamental level. Yeah,
and it might be death by 1,000 cuts with something like TV, where, yeah, it's definitely not as powerful of an experience because, you could just turn it off, or, if you try really hard, you can break the trance of getting absorbed into watching whatever you're watching. But the point is that, how much time do people spend on TV? Or, TV is an outdated example at this point. Phones or your computer screen is much more likely, of course. But the point is, at a screen, let's say, well, if you do several hours every day and you do that every year, well, then it's like, over that much time, it's going to have a substantial effect on you.
Definitely.
And I think we're seeing that.
You think that, like, the use of... I mean, I guess I would agree with you anyway if you were saying it. Like, the use of these technologies is, like, a large reason for why people are in the spiritual and mental states that we're in.
I'm not suggesting here that before smart devices, this phenomenon wasn't occurring. That's why I was saying TV at first. And even before the TV, yes, to some extent the radio, yes, to some extent even books. Like, everything is a potential distraction, but that's not the point. The point is our level of distractions has greatly increased as time has gone on. It's not to say that there's never been distractions. That's what people get wrong when they're like comparing pictures of people on their phones on the subway to pictures of people with magazines, and they're like, see, nothing's changed. Well, it's like, no, a lot has changed. Those are just flat pieces of gray paper, which is a physical thing you're touching, and you're reading some local news probably, compared to a device that is connected to literally endless information. It'd be more accurate if everyone in the phone was also in their own little bubble, right? But we don't see the bubble, so people just see the like, that is it's such a view into the psyche of a normie who really sees the phone and the magazine as like, oh, it's the same thing. Like, okay, you don't understand the effects of that on your mind and the difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went off on a bit of a rant there, but I think No,
but I agree with what you're saying anyways. Like, I do think that the what we have today is probably not making things easier. If anything, it's making things worse. Another, like, thing that's worth considering is that, like, I don't know if there's proof to this, so I'm kind of talking on my ass here, to be honest, but okay. Maybe I feel like smartphones and modern technology access has got to be contributing to, like, ADD or ADHD or something like that. And if you think about it, it's like that's literally the opposite of meditation, right?
Right.
Because
Distracted
meditation is like
constantly.
you're training your focus on you, like if you're focusing on your sensations, you're training yourself to focus on sensations.
But
It's very
interestingly,
singular.
regarding ADHD, interestingly, they also have a tendency. It's either they're very distracted or they become hyper fixated. I've
Yes,
long
true.
thought that I might be one of them, ADD or ADHD. Basically, I've always found that it's hard for me to. I am someone who gets easily distracted. I even in conversation go off on tangents, this kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
same.
and I don't always view that as a bad thing, by the way. But I will say, the hyperfixation aspect, I think, can be a very positive thing too, because I think you can use that for something like finding self-awareness.
I agree 100%. Yes, but the only thing is that like I don't. Okay, so I'm not like someone. I don't think I have ADHD. I do have hard time like focus. Like I do zone out of things all the time and have a hard time paying attention to stuff I don't care about.
Right.
But I don't
I
know if
think
that's
you might have
ADHD.
I think you might have one of them, dude. If I'm being honest.
Maybe I
We
do.
don't have to get into it here, but there's other. I don't know. I think there's other factors
Well,
that they can
okay.
affect it.
Even using myself as an example,
Yeah.
uh, like I can't make myself hyper focus on something that I don't like. Like I can hyper focus on things that I'm like insanely interested about, but if
Yes.
I'm not, I can't like force myself to achieve
Fine.
that state.
But yes, but you became interested in self-awareness.
Yes, I did specifically
Yeah.
because that's like something that I've always been drawn to, or whatever, like the
Sure.
spiritual enlightenment type of thing. But that's just that like that happens to be the thing for me, right? But like, what about for everyone else who has ADHD and like the things that they hyper focus on aren't they
Well,
don't provide that much benefit to them? Maybe I don't know. It's got to be people
right,
like
right.
that.
It's hard to break that cycle. I think hearing, I think in any, I think the answer to that is the same way you answer how can the environment help shape someone, or not, the environment. By the environment, I mean even other people. That's kind of what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Shape someone towards more self-awareness, and this just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I think it's definitely possible to convince people or to get people there through
Compel
like
them.
a communication, but also I think certain substances, psychedelics, allow you to feel, to experience that self-awareness, at least momentarily.
Right. So what you're saying is we should give everybody acid without telling
No, no, I'm not
No?
suggesting that. Never said
Signed
that.
Glink.
If it was if every single person in the world that was like an adult and also like people in governments and in corporations and basically in positions of power, let's say, if every one of them took it, if we started with them, I think we should start with them, and then everything else will follow, as it should. As above, so below. But also, it doesn't
No,
have to
so
start
what's
with
gonna
them. It could start with
what's gonna happen is they're all just gonna like quit their jobs, and then some other
True.
schmucks are gonna take their place.
Okay, yeah, maybe. But the point is, it doesn't. It also doesn't have to start with them. It could start with one, I believe one person. Maybe. Okay, here's a crazy thought. What if Jesus was a Buddha-like figure?
He
In the
was,
sense,
yes.
and he was, in the sense that, and Buddha and these other people throughout history, what if they were figures who enlightened a humongous group of people?
Well, why do you say that part? Like a humongous group of people. Why do you?
Well, Jesus' followers, for example, his disciples, after his resurrection, as it's called in the Bible,
Yeah.
they kind of but after he died, they were kind of all abandoning Jesus, and they were kind of abandoning each other. But after the events of the resurrection, they all went to their graves defend being a follower of Christ who had now already died. And, you could come up with any explanations for that or whatever you want. But if I view it as a symbolic thing, I view it as they reached enlightenment in the sense that his teachings stuck with them in the sense that they went to their death with it. And they were the ones who really spread Christianity throughout the world. His 12 disciples, in their own ways, like the Apostle Paul. You had like different, Peter and different disciples of his went to different parts of the world and basically spread this gospel. And they ended up creating the biggest religion ever, which is Christianity.
I like that thought process. I
think in many ways, just to conclude though, I think in many ways, Christianity it's clearly fallen out of favor. I think with most Westerners,
I
certainly.
think organized religion is really heavily falling out of favor.
True.
In the last couple decades.
But I think something like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think something like Buddhism is kind of more timeless in terms of its teachings and its practices. Like it's more of a direct way to get there.
It's not an organized religion. It's philosophy. It's just really a bunch of philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I have to agree. Like, a path to God is while there's probably it's probably supposed to be the same thing as enlightenment. Like, the way it's put in Buddhism is like quite literal and like on the money.
Right. Right. And I think for that reason, it's kind of been the favorite of more modern day, like hippie type or people who are kind of more into psychedelics and such. I think it's kind of been the one of choice for the philosophy, spiritual system, if you want to even call it that, of choice, because it's just the most direct and it's the most timeless. There's no it's not like, it doesn't have the same baggage in many ways that Christianity or Islam or even Judaism and whatever other religions there are have.
At least not in the Western world.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I would really like to see that be the way forward, personally. But I also feel like the packaging isn't right or something, and it's just like it needs something to catch on. Some sort of modernized take.
Right.
Something.
That's what I was trying to do.
Well, that's what we're gonna do.
That's what we're gonna do. Yes.
Yeah.